Buonasera.
Close, because Pat will be there.
Thank you. Okay, today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2022, 6 o'clock at the auditorium. This is the regular meeting of the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission. May I have roll call, please, Sue?
Yes. Mark Ingram,
Here.
Glenn Marshall,
Here.
Ruth Hager,
Here.
and Sue Hubbard is here.
All right. Can we have a...
Oh,
Oh, Kevin.
Kevin's here.
Sorry, Kevin.
Kevin.
Kevin Relay by video.
He's here. All right. We have a quorum.
Yeah, the audio isn't great, so
Okay. We can hear you. Look, there's a delay between your video and the audio, but it's all good. Okay. So we have a quorum. May I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I move to approve tonight's agenda.
That's Mark. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Sue? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 1, 2, 3, 4 to 0. Tonight's agenda is approved. Ooh. Public comments. It's the first thing on our agenda. Do we have any public comments tonight? Anyone in the audience? No? Okay. Begin with chairman's comments. I would just like to first of all, make a comment that I feel things are a little complicated lately. I feel like we lose Kevin.
I think we lost Kevin.
Yeah, it's really broken up. I don't understand what the issue is. Connection was fine a while ago.
Okay, I'll start over. We'll pretend you can hear us. We can't see you, but we know you can hear us.
Okay.
I would like to say that we've all been, the commission, reading emails and reports from the director, and I feel like there's some miscommunication about when things should be done, how things should be done, priorities. The director and I, as the chair, try to meet once a week and try to keep track of the priorities and his job and his function. So I just hope we can work on coming up with a way to make that run more smoothly. And that's it. Other than that, I'm very happy with the way things are going lately. I'm happy with all the work Parks has done, and I appreciate all of y'all. Thank you. Director Scott?
Thank you. And just to add to what you said, yeah, I think the only thing that I would say to add in addition to that is if a commissioner has a question, not just a simple question, but they're seeking a lot of documents or something along those lines, or they want something done that's substantial, if everyone would realize that you and I do meet and we coordinate the work and prioritize things, and so to if they would run issues like that by you, that you and I have already prioritize work for the week and sometimes 2 or 3 weeks. And it would be good to have some coordination rather than something just drop or requested that is wanted right away.
I'm glad you feel that way. I think the same way. I think it would work well to funnel up the kind of things that, like reports that Pat was looking for and other commissioners look for sometimes. If we want to, questions we want, if it's not a quick question, funnel it through the chair, and then when we have our meeting, we can fit it into his schedule and make sure he's not losing track of the things and the priorities, and that we're aware of what he's doing and when he's doing what, when he's working on reports, when he's working in the field, when he's in the office. I think it will help coordinate things better. Have all those run through me. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that would help a lot, and that will become a lot easier if and when we can ever find an administrative
Yes,
staff
that's part of the
person.
problem. Yeah, you are.
That will help quite a bit. So anyway, I'll be real brief. We've got a lot to cover. The main things that I'd like to just address that have occurred is the underground destruction that we had at Harding Spring has been remedied. There's still going to have to be some engineering done on how the water flows into the culvert that was repaired, but the culvert itself has been repaired, and I spoke with Dwayne at Public Works today that we will try to coordinate our efforts for his department to create the proper channeling of that water down into that culvert, and at the same time we are at the point where we're going to need to rebuild the stairs that go up to Lover's Leap. And so we're going to coordinate those efforts, try to get it one design, so concrete could be poured for piers for our stairs, et cetera. So yes, we understand there's still some work to be done there, but at least we have the park back and we can start with planting, et cetera. Also, I'm delighted to report that the concrete was finally able to come in for magnetic spring. That was the tail wagging the dog on that project, and I spoke with the contractor today, and he said it should, the rest of it, putting it back together, the stone around the basins, et cetera, that should go very quickly at this point. So we were in there putting in new sprinkler systems today. We're doing PVC now instead of the flexible lines that would tend to, whether it's people that get in there or their dogs or deer, they tend to drag those out, and you've got flexible drip lines all over the garden. So we're digging in PVC lines, and it'll be a lot cleaner. All you'll see is a small stem coming up with a sprinkler, so that'll be nice. The auction is nearly done. We so far only have about $22,000 worth of purchases that are paid for. We did not get our reserve price on the dump truck, and so we did not sell that. We will likely reattempt to auction it. And then likewise with the Jeep, we did go ahead and re-auction that, and we already have met our reserve price this time around. So we do have some additional funds coming in, but a little over $22,000 at this point. That's not money in the bank just yet. It's still with the finance department, but they will issue a check when all is said and done. I'd like to point out that we have the tree planting ceremony on April 29th, where the mayor will plant the tree. That's for Arbor Day. That will be on the hairpin turn right across from the park's main office. I did meet with an engineer today about the engineering for the walls at Crescent Spring, and he said he should have something to us within a week or two, and then we can hopefully start those repairs. And finally, the Stephen Foster Memorial, I would like to remind everyone, I think we've stated this before, but May 22nd between 2 o'clock and roughly 5 o'clock at the group campsite, we will have the memorial for Stephen Foster. We will then meet at the trailhead for what is now Foster Trail, and the mayor will do an official dedication of that.
Again, Scott, what is that date?
That is May 22nd. That's a Sunday, I believe, and it's from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And we'll start getting some things posted on the blog about that and some other things that we have going on. And I thank you for listening.
Okay. Committee reports. We don't have any committee reports that I know of, do we? No? Old business, none. Let's move on to new business. The first thing we need to deal with is approving the first quarter financial statements. Does everyone have a copy or have seen it? Yes? Yes? Can I have a motion to approve the first quarter financial statements?
I move to approve the first quarter financial statements as presented by Scott.
That's Mark for first. Do I have a second?
I can second.
Sue seconds. Discussion.
I have one question. Last year, we were getting the comparisons. It was year to year, and it was a little problematic because we were compared to 2020. But even so, I found that a little bit more useful than what we're doing now, which is comparing it by dividing it into into quarters. And I was wondering if that was a decision made by the Financial Committee or why that was changed.
Yes, it was made in reality by two financial committees, and in a sense. What happened is the Finance Committee that we had previously, we had worked to tremendously streamline the chart of accounts. You might recall the P&L statement, for instance, last year, instead of a page and a half, was probably 4 or 5 pages.
I'm glad that got cleaned up.
Right, and so we've reduced the number of accounts so dramatically that it's impossible to compare.
Okay, got you.
I actually ran the report, and it was senseless. You
So-
had numbers this year that were comparing to accounts that we didn't have last year, so and vice versa.
Okay,
So-
so that we could potentially go back to that in the future years.
Absolutely. In fact, the beauty of it is now having it. I used to have to do all that in a spreadsheet, dump all of this into a spreadsheet and try to adjust things. From now on, it will be very easy because you run a report with a comparison, and literally it should be a few keystrokes, and you have the report. So it's going to be what months ago was taking days will now take minutes.
And it'll definitely be more relevant first quarter next year. It'll be very relevant.
Yes.
As we look at those two.
Right,
Like you said,
yes.
we can't do it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things that aren't spread evenly throughout the year.
Exactly. And it's going to take this sort of year to probably get that to come up. I'd also like to emphasize, though, on this balance sheet. Scott and I did go over all this, a lot of detail, and as you'll see on the balance sheet, there's a lot of fixed assets valuations, and those have just been carried over from who knows how long. And we were on the phone with somebody, I forgot who it was.
Scott.
Yeah, and that's going to be probably another project in the not too distant future to go through that, and they really need to be reevaluated and see what really needs to be on here, what doesn't. I mean, it doesn't, as the balance sheet, it basically is used to balance out the balance sheet, but they need to be a little bit more realistic evaluations of these things
Mark.
over time.
Mark, I would suggest that you talk to the finance director at the city. We had this conversation with him last year, and it's any adjustments that we make to our balance sheet is going to affect the city's balance sheet. So they're going to have to agree to anything that we do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand it's not an easy undertaking. It's not something you just go in and just start checking things off.
Right.
There's a process for that, so it won't be tomorrow for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? Questions? Okay. All in favor of approving the financials?
Aye.
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 I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say aye. I was counting your ayes. 1, 2. Kevin, aye.
Yes.
Bren?
Aye. Oh,
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
yes, aye.
Thank you, sorry. Okay. The second item is to consideration of the contract for events promotion. That is I don't have a written copy of it with me because I couldn't get my printer to work.
The Lake Leatherwood City Park Outdoor Event Promotion and Management Agreement.
Thank you.
Shall I take it from here?
Yes, please, Scott.
Thank you. You might recall I believe at our last regular meeting, I was directed to, or it's actually probably before that, but we did a request for proposals to see what we could come up with as far as an outdoor event promotion and management company. We are in the business of managing parks and the property itself, in essence creating and maintaining a venue. But we don't have expertise in actually running or promoting such events. And this has come up in the past, including things like the Fat Tire Festival, et cetera. And so we went through that process. The request for proposal process is a lengthy one. There were two companies that responded. It was actually fairly close. And the winner was Slaughter Trail Guides. And Dustin Slaughter is here, I believe, as you can see back there. The gallery is a little dark there, but he did wave, so I believe that is him. He is here to answer any sort of questions, but first of all, if you have any questions of me as far as why things are written a certain way, I would point out Section 2 just authorizes various events. I tried to point out that we don't want just bike-related events, and we do want family-related events, et cetera. Section 3, we have some environmental preservation issues that was specifically requested by one or more of the commissioners. We talk about our rules and, of course, attach our rules. And we also, although we don't have our natural resources preservation plan, it states that we are in the process of developing one, and that when that has been adopted by the commission, that the promoter will be expected to abide by that. In fact, it has language in there requiring training their personnel to be able to comply with that. In other words, what is a leatherwood tree, for instance, and how to know it when you see it, and in fact, it prohibits them from even doing such things as widening or dealing with our trails. Our trail maintenance people will deal with the trails, and we shouldn't run into an issue like happened a few years ago where there was a tree that was killed, in essence, from we don't know why or who, but the point is we are putting provisions in here to address that sort of thing, and I hope that it meets your approval. If anyone has any questions for me, we can deal with those, and then, as I said, Mr. Slaughter is here to answer any questions that you might have of him.
I have quite a number of comments.
Yes.
So shall I go ahead? Or
Dustin, why don't you go ahead and step up to the microphone and introduce yourself so you can be ready, just in case we need to ask questions?
Sure, yeah, I'd
Thank
be
you.
happy to.
Thank you.
And maybe just address which of us you're asking.
Yeah.
Or both.
Okay, yeah, and it may just be putting things out there. So I'm just going to kind of work through the document. So the first is, we had discussed that it was going to be 3 to 5 events, but according to this, the executive director can increase it to 10, and that seemed like a lot of power for the executive director. Any increase should definitely be, I would have thought, come through the commission.
We had talked about 3 to 5 initially, and that it could be expanded. Frankly, I don't have a preference as to, that it be me versus the commission, so we could certainly make that a change if...
And I could comment to that too, Scott.
Yes.
Well, for example, Scott received an email from a company that wanted to do an event, but it wasn't a race. And so I think maybe clarify that question of yours about the number of events that could be allowed. There's several bike events that we do want to, plan and promote, but if there was something like a kids event or a NICA, a high school mountain bike event, or something that's not even bike related, that could be added to the event list. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, it's probably more of a question between us as who has the authority to approve extra
Sure.
events. I mean, if it was, I mean, obviously, if it's something at the ball fields, that would be a different issue. But to me, when I read this, it just seemed like you could just, it didn't specify what kind of events those extra events were.
Well, we could strike the words, and for the record, we are speaking of Section 3C.
Yeah.
We could strike the words executive director of the, and that would leave us with, by the written authorization of the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission.
Section 2C.
Yeah.
2C.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
You have
I-
any questions?
yeah, I'd still prefer it to say commission, because that's doubling the number of events. I mean, that's, yeah.
Yeah, if we strike those 4 words, then we'll say that.
Okay. Okay. And then I had,
Authorization of the Eureka Springs Park and Rec.
okay. So then I had questions about the Natural Resources Preservation Plan, because that is not a document I am familiar with. It's hard to know, we haven't seen it yet. But it was kind of, the questions I think to you, Scott, about the preparation. Is the biological input into this? Do you have you have samples where this has been done other places and are clear what the document should contain? Or how has this been prepared?
Yes, I actually downloaded some samples. In fact, one I recall was from Fairfax County, Virginia. I recall that because that's where I grew up. At any rate, I did look at some of the plans that were out there that I was going to use substantially. In fact, that particular one is a pretty good one. And create a draft that then would have to be approved by the commission. There were so many things going on this past month that it's just nothing that could be accomplished that quickly. In fact, since it needs to be approved by the commission, it would take us a couple of months, probably 2 to 3 months. But that's why it states that if this contract is signed, Slaughter understands that we are preparing one, and that once approved by the commission, he will be required to abide by it.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my other concern about this is that this is a very important issue to, I know, at least a couple of
Yes.
members on the commission. And once this is signed and we're actually putting on events, it's just very easy for this to get pushed aside and not done. So how can we ensure that really does get done?
Well, we could, in fact, frankly, it would have been done were it not for issues that were just discussed a few moments ago. We could put a deadline on when I would have it completed, and I would say certainly comfortable with 60 days. I could do it in 30 if there aren't unanticipated interruptions. So I would hate to commit to something. I would say 60 days for sure, and I would absolutely plan on having it out for your review within 30 days, ideally much sooner.
When do you anticipate your first event will be, if this is signed now?
We have an event that we would like to host at the end of May on the 28th and 29th. But it's all on established, trail, it's all on the,
Yeah.
normal trails.
Right,
so.
yeah. Scott, can we at least have a draft before the first event?
Give me that date again.
May 28th and 29th.
If there are no unanticipated interruptions, I can have it to you well before then.
Okay.
And maybe I can help with that. Like I said, I'll try to funnel some of these reports and things that we try to do amongst ourselves in the commission so that we can keep you focused.
Just
Yeah,
to
and I-
interject in that, you guys, that sounds like a very important document
Yes.
that everybody really cares about. I don't think you should rush to do that and just rush something through. It should be done very well and very thought out, and because it's going to be a living, breathing document later on. So we have things going on at the park every day, all the time, and we don't have that document.
True.
And I don't think we should rush that just for that event. Not that it's not important, because I think it is important, but I think that
No, that's a good
I just
point.
don't want you to just rush and do one when it is very important to several members of the commission and the community. I think that
Especially if the wording is in the contract that says you have to abide by.
Well, I was asked when I can have a draft done, and obviously, if the commission looks at it and determines that it needs a lot more work, then it may not be completed at that point. But I think the question was when I could get a draft done.
Yeah, because I realize getting approval may take longer.
Yes. So, yes, by the end of May, I believe, was the question. Yes.
Okay, and then I'm moving on to section 3C. It says that slaughter will cause areas used in conjunction with the event to be thoroughly cleaned, and those areas will be inspected by a manager of the company to ensure compliance. So my question is to you, Scott, will Parks also be checking those areas? And if slaughter is not in compliance, what happens?
Well, two things. The first part of that is I think I intended when I drafted that to say by a manager, which at the moment is essentially me, but by a manager of the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So we would change that, I think.
yeah. I mean, it may be possible to be staff, not necessarily you, but it should be someone from the parks.
Okay, so by a member.
Yeah, staff.
Of
And that's how we've done it in the past, when we used to check after, like, you know, Kevin would know after the events, someone would go out there and check.
Yeah.
Parks would.
Yeah, maybe Sam or someone. Yeah. And then the second part of that question is, if they find that things are not cleaned, what happens then?
Yeah, and I think.
that is definitely addressed somewhere else in the.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. In fact, I think when we get a little further on, I think we find a place where it talks about Parks and
Well, yeah,
Recreation
I think-
inspecting. So this, I believe once we get there, we're going to find that subsection C did actually mean the manager of the company.
Well, if you go to section 5A3, there is more talk about litter control, and it goes into more detail about what needs to be removed, but it still doesn't say what happens if those items are not removed.
I believe there is a section
There
that
is.
says
Yeah,
that we'll have a certain amount of time to
They can be-
to clean it up, and then if it's not done, the park staff will do it and send them
And then send them a bill. Yeah, it's definitely in there.
It's in there, and I believe it's under general provisions where it allows us to, and I'm looking for it, but it allows us to go and do the work and bill them for it.
It's a 5A, section 5A, paragraph 5. The 10-day, is that what you're talking about?
That's it.
The remedy 10 days?
Yes. So it's a lengthy paragraph, but in the event slaughter or its agents, employees, et cetera, fail damage the assigned lands or facilities or make any improvements to the lands or facilities not approved by the executive director, then we may require them to remove the improvements and or repair the lands or facilities to their original condition. In the event slaughter fails to make such remedy after 10 days, then the commission, without liability to slaughter, may remove said improvements and or repair the land or facilities to their original condition and invoice slaughter for the cost thereof. Slaughter shall promptly reimburse the commission for all reasonable costs associated with the removal of any improvements and or repair of the lands and facilities.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that was covered, thanks. Okay.
So that being said, I believe the language that I had
I think it's correct.
in 3C was correct.
Was correct.
Their manager is to do a preliminary inspection so as not to waste our time.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else, Sue, or is that your?
Yeah, no, I'm still
I'm sorry.
looking
sorry.
through, yeah.
I wasn't sure if you were pausing or whether you were.
Yeah, I'm just, yeah, I just, so this is back to that section 5A5. It says repairs are going to be made in 10 days, and that may be the way the contract needs to be, but if it's a damage to vegetation, then I want to make sure that it's not rushed. It may be parks that would need to do it and reimburse it, but I want to make sure we don't get kind of slapdash, because it's going to take time to get plans and
Right.
things out.
Now, see, this isn't a matter of a limitation on us, it's a limitation on slaughter. So if they
Right.
do some destruction, let's say they destroy a tree, which is your example, and they can't get it done in 10 days, there's no time limit on how long it takes for us to do it. If it takes 60 days to find the appropriate tree and to get it in place, then we'll do it, and they'll be billed for it.
Okay. So I had a question for you, Mr. Slaughter.
Yes, ma'am.
So one thing I didn't find noticed in here that I've run into in the past of, and this is kind of around the issue of not causing minimum disturbance to other users, which I know is covered in here, but of putting up a notice in advance to let people know that the trails are going to be closed, or they're going to be impacted by other users
Yeah,
of your race. Is
definitely.
that something you will do?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the majority of all of our events, we try to work with, whoever runs a Facebook page, or, in this case, the parks that manages the venue, and put out notices anywhere online, or, maybe in the paper, and definitely on, putting a sign in one of the kiosks at the park would be great to notify normal trail users that there'll be an event going on.
Okay, great.
On, any setup and the weekend and time of the event, and when stuff will be taken down. Normally, we try to get everything down within 24 hours. A lot of times 12 hours, right when we're sweeping, we can take trash with us. But something else to note on that flyer, to make sure, people, if someone comes out on Monday and sees, Monday morning and sees something, they know that it will be taken down that day.
Okay, great.
And if I could add, there's one other provision that I think we should consider for this, and it is one of those that wasn't just boilerplate, my first draft, and that was initially I had a site plan that would be attached to this agreement that identified exactly what areas would be used, and that was going to be part of this agreement. We elected instead, in fact, I explained to Mr. Slaughter that we have some real concerns about people just using any area of the park. And so we changed that to where each event has to have a site plan approved by the commission. So if he is using an area that I feel is overreaching, or let's say an area that if we had used a site plan today, it would be this big area, but later we find an area that's more sensitive and we don't want anyone using that area for a biking or a running event, then we don't have to approve that site plan. In fact, we get to decide event by event what area they're allowed to use. So that's just an additional protection to not just have them running, anywhere they want. No, we get to, from event to event, assign the areas that they need to confine themselves to. I think that'll help, hopefully a lot, but certainly gives us a little bit more say of what's going on and specifically where.
Right, yeah. No, this was just around notification of the public of those choices. So Mr. Slaughter, I know you would have this covered in your events, but we have a list of the different things that you need to provide. And there's actually I didn't find any mention of restrooms. And Scott, I'm wondering, for us to protect ourselves, if we want to make sure there is a minimum number in there before the event can go ahead.
It is in here.
I thought it was, yeah.
I didn't find it.
Yes. It's, take me a moment to find it. Not only restrooms, but dumpsters, et cetera.
I did not find, I'm finding first aid and emergency plan, but I don't remember seeing anything about restrooms or dumpsters.
I'm looking, and I will find it. By the way, I just came across the language on the site plan, and that's section 13A1. Also, I just came across 13A4, which is how they can't add, extend, maintain, or realign any trails without prior written consent. Section 6A, 4, and I should say 6A, talks about a number of things that have to be provided,
Right.
but specifically, I think 4 might address what you're talking about. A minimum of 1 manned general aid station will be set up that will have food and water sufficient for event participants and trash receptacles for eliminating and limiting trash in the area. So I don't see
Restrooms.
restrooms. I'm rather certain it's elsewhere in here, but we could add it here as well, even if that would make it redundant.
Yeah, well, if you could just make sure it's in one spot.
So I will add that. If I don't find it elsewhere, once I get back to the office and have a computer, I can do a word search.
Okay.
So I'll research porta potty, and I believe it's in there, but if not, add it here.
So Mr. Slaughter, I'm not sure of the standard, but is it typical to have someone with first aid and CPR at an aid station? Because that doesn't seem like a very high standard.
The majority of our events that, and that's kind of evaluated by the particular format of event. And I think with parts before we, discussed a way to rate events on, their risk, but it's typically, or I'd say pretty much every event we do, we either hire the local EMS to have a standby ambulance, as well as we have volunteers and, specifically a nonprofit group that has members that come and they're present on the trail and at aid stations that are CPR and first aid certified. This year and since the pandemic, it has been, and it kind of varies from city to city and county to county. For example, in Texas, some counties are so short-staffed and they cover such a broad, area. They haven't been able to provide a dedicated standby, but we have turned to some professionals that we know that we will hire a contract to come out and be on site at the events, and then work with the local EMS to have a plan. So they know where the event is happening, where they should go, where they can park and get in and out safely, and who's on site that's going to kind of be the lead on attending to someone who may need medical help.
Okay. Yeah, so just why I'm questioning that, because CPR first aid, it kind of varies with the Red Cross, how they do it, but at times you can do that in a day of training. It's a two-day easy training. And especially if you do...
All of our staff, myself and everyone that works for me is CPR and first aid certified, and then we go beyond that with... And I think in this contract, it requires us to provide a medical plan that would be a part of that, event agreement that the commission would sign off on. So, I guess if you saw an event that seemed like it was higher risk, that needed more medical mitigation, we could add that layer. But, I guess to your point, it would be good to, I guess either set a standard or require, that the whole plan for each event is included in that medical response procedure.
And if I may, that's what Attachment 3 is about, the emergency response plan and planning guide. And earlier in the agreement, it requires that they prepare an emergency response plan, and Attachment 3 is just the planning guide. So they are required per event to prepare an emergency plan, and depending on the nature of it, something that's more dangerous than other things, we might require fire department, or a lot of times it's off-duty medical personnel. And so that's an event by event that we have to approve before the event can transpire. In fact, it's not just events that we have in our department head meetings. There's often a event permit that's being circulated that, for instance, the police and fire department have to sign off on. So that has to go to them for their opportunity for comment and approval.
Yeah, so if EMS is signing off, then I would be happy with that, but maybe we should have that language so that that's clear that they get that approval.
So that fire department has to sign off on me. Okay.
Yeah. So then I'm moving on to section 7 on payments. I think in the past we had spoken about having a per-person fee, and I wondered why this was switched to just a percentage.
That was actually my request and subject of actual negotiations. It wasn't just boilerplate. I got to thinking how if it's a per-person fee that we just state in this contract rather than a percent, because this is percent of gross.
Right.
In other words, not net. So he wouldn't be able to put a bunch of expenses in there and drive in his Mercedes and claim that that's an expense. This is net, gross. Because my concern is we could say right for now, for instance, $10 a person. And in a few years, or even maybe there's some special event that he has where there's a, I don't know, $500 entrance fee. And if we've already agreed on $10, for instance, is what we get, well, then we're cutting ourselves short. So this was something that I requested, and maybe you could go through the math. You said a typical event, you're figuring, is it 200
Yeah,
people?
well, we've done some event contracts before with you guys, and, both times I've sent over some example contracts that we've had from that we have with the National Forest Service on an event we do in Oklahoma, examples from Arkansas State Park, and we do a couple in Texas at their state parks. And so, we kind of use those as two examples. In Texas, the Texas State Park, they do for special events $9 a person, and that's what, and I mean it's definitely on the high end of some, a lot of the events that we do, especially from like private land, which makes sense. And that's what was put in my initial proposal. That was the response to the RFP. The National Forest Service, for example, they do 5% of your gross. So both, a flat fee and a percentage of gross are both pretty transparent numbers. They're easy to share. And basically the percentage that Scott and I negotiated to was kind of, it was rounded up from what the $9 fee would have been with the event that we're proposing in May. It's a 2-day event, a little bit higher, actually higher cost than a lot of our 1-day events that we promote. So the $9 would have actually, been really, really good for you guys, in a 1-day event total. But basically this, that 6.5% is rounded up from what the $9 fee would have been if we had 300 riders at this May event, and charged $140 for the registration fee. So that's kind of how we got to 6.5%, and it's a little bit higher. It's 1.5% higher than the 5% that the National Forest Service does, and it's basically equal to what Texas State Park, what they do.
Well, and if I could point out a couple of things about that. Again, this was my request.
Okay.
Because I realized the dollars, and we could be selling ourselves short by not making it a percentage. In matter of fact, it goes on to say in the paragraph that you're reading, not just entrance fees, but sponsor fees, fees charged to or received from vendors, and any other fees received by slaughter related to the event.
Okay.
So if he does make maybe a ridiculous example, but let's say he sells $10,000 worth of T-shirts. Well, we get 6.5% of that. So the point is, it's all fees rather than just $9 or whatever we had initially talked about per person. This, if you have a large event where there's, sponsors and vendors and, I wanted 6.5% of everything, not just,
Okay.
Yeah,
no, I was just wondering the reason behind it. That's
yeah.
fine.
And if I may, just because I came across it, Section 6A3 is where we have the emergency plan, and it said approved by the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission, and I'm adding, and the Eureka Springs Fire Department. So that covers that concern.
Okay, great. So on that same section, it talks about attachment 4, which lists possible fees. And then if you go to attachment 4, it says there are no extra fees. And I just wondered why we even bother with that.
Well, as I said, when I rewrote Section 7A to make it 6% of all entrance fees and other fees, initially I was looking at, well, we may have to list a bunch of different fees here. And so it did make attachment 4 superfluous, but maybe not. I got to thinking that there conceivably could be some sort of fee that's charged. I don't know. I don't know what that would be, but that's why I left it in there, that there is the ability to charge additional fees.
Maybe a shuttle fee?
Yeah.
A shuttle fee. Let's say the city started charging some sort of a fee for I don't know what, but it gives us the ability to come in and say, okay, there's now these additional fees that are involved. It's not something that we like unilaterally say. In other words, the 6.5% is on all the normal events, but let's say there's some other sort of fee. I can't imagine what that could be today, but I didn't want to just tie ourselves down to the 6.5% and not be able to add something if something came up later.
Maybe a campsite, in December last year, the last event we held at Leatherwood, we actually paid parks. We hired you guys, both of the shuttles for one day to help with the race format, and then on the side I did it separately, but I also booked the group site in the back where some of the staff camped the night after the race. So it made sense to me.
Yeah, and I want to point out you on this fee thing. If you have a sponsor that, let's say they sell bike helmets, and they want to be there and have their bike helmets on, they paid you $250 to set up a booth there. We get 6.5% of that $250, but we don't get any percentage of any bike helmets that they sell.
I believe so.
That's not what this is saying.
Right.
So when you said the T-shirt thing earlier, that's made me think, but we're not going to get any retail fees based on how much they sell. But it's if they get fees from people to do this kind of things, that's really what this is referring to, right?
Right. And my hypothetical was, let's say he did sell T-shirts or something. I was grasping for an example of what that would be. So anything additional that he gets, we get a portion of. So if he's going to have vendors, and I would imagine he would get a fee from them. We get a portion of that fee.
Okay.
Makes sense.
So there's a possibility that there may be things that don't get repaired and put back right at the end of the event, and Slaughter is going to be responsible for paying that. Scott, did you consider collecting a deposit for them? Or we would consider that for each event so that we have that money and don't have to go chasing around after it?
I did consider it, and it would be prudent. So that's something we could certainly add. I think what bogged me down on that is coming up with a mechanism for valuing that, although we could maybe come up with a specific dollar amount before any event, $1,000 deposit, I don't know.
Do they put up any type of a bond?
How do you quantify? Well, it could be a deposit of whether it's a bond, a cash bond, or if he wanted to use a bonding company and pay 10%, he could do that. It's not in there. There's a couple ways we could do that. Like I said, it could be just a flat rate for any event. It could be something he puts up front, meaning not per event, but just as part of doing the contract. So there are mechanisms that I can conceive of that we can use to accomplish something like that. Because, of course, the only other option then, if he doesn't pay it, he's in breach of contract.
Right.
Contract is terminated. He'll never do business with us again.
Right.
He does substantially, he's our only outside shuttle operator right now. I mean, he would be giving up quite a bit if he did that. But yes, if you wanted to, we could, it's a matter of coming up with what that would be.
Yeah, I feel like any amount would be relatively arbitrary, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, I mean, it's a contract between us and them. So we put a lot of burden on them already with insurance and cleanup, and we can bill them. And, if we're going to build a relationship with them, let's build the relationship with them. And it's not that having something, if it really did the trick, I would say do it. But if it's just, so we put something on paper and it doesn't really meet the requirements of, who knows what could happen any day, whether they're there or we're, or it's just us doing it. I hate to put stuff in that's just for show. Is it something that really going to do? I think a bond actually sounds like probably a very common practice for contractors when they're doing business with the city or any government agency. So I would look into that probably more than any other kind of cash something, deposit, because it's just going to be arbitrary. And probably a hardship on these guys while being arbitrary. It's just
And us too, keeping track of it. There's just no reason, I don't think there's a reason for it with a contract like this. We used to do deposits with groups. I know various functions that have happened over the years. There's deposits, and then you applied it towards their payment when they were done, et cetera. Wasn't always done. It was done sometimes. It was done per event, decided yes or no. I don't know that, a deposit doesn't make sense to me if you're going to have a contract person do all of them.
Well, and keep in mind, we have an ongoing relationship with this company. They just paid their renewal fee for their second year of operation as the shuttle vendor?
Yes, since there's been a permit.
Okay, since we started that program. And, I know what he makes essentially from us because we get a portion of that.
Right.
And I can't imagine him jeopardizing that. That is the bond in essence. He would be cut off of all of that. And even if, let's say we had a $1,000 bond or I don't know, $2,500 bond, pick a number, he would give up well more than that just in being cut off from the things he's already doing.
Yeah, so I know when we were doing single events, we always requested a deposit. And because otherwise, the event's over, the promoters moved on, and it took a lot of staff time trying to track down and get that money back.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's so necessary when we're doing multiple events, but also it does mean, it may be that these things kind of go over and there may be several events, and if it can mount up and
Sure.
we end up with a larger amount that we are owed and have to track it down. I was actually just thinking about trying to save your time of having to, be out there trying to track down and get money reimbursed.
I mean, to add what Scott said, we're in the office, probably at least once a month, if not a couple times a month, to purchase wristbands, and it's pretty common practice. We use an online registration website that's pretty common, and either before the event even starts or the Monday following, the money's deposited, and it's common. I travel to. I want to travel less. I want to do these things more consistently than traveling. But typically, when I'm traveling, the the venue owner has a check before I leave. So, but
Okay. I just wanted to bring it up for discussion.
And is that Sam that was trying to get our attention? Yeah. Well, let me, Ruth.
Yes, Sam,
As the chair, he, of course, is an employee, so if he's raising his hand, I assume he has something.
Sam, if you have a question, yes, you can ask.
I was just pointing out that, as the trails,
I'm sorry, Sam, can you come to the mic? It's hard to hear you.
as the trails coordinator, I see Dustin or Nick like every single weekend, so I don't think we'll have any trouble tracking him down. He's out there all the time.
Okay, thank you. Well, I also think that part of the reason we're choosing to do a single promoter is to do away with the bother of things like deposits.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Well, and the whole point of a single promoter is we don't have to worry about event by event.
right,
We worry about a promoter.
right.
Yeah.
So moving on to insurance. So you have to provide insurance, which is a good thing. I wasn't clear if that's for each event, if it's something that is an umbrella for the whole contract. And if it is per event, a lot of items that need to be prepared per event, there's a deadline, but I didn't see anything for the insurance.
Right. Well, there is a deadline in the sense that Section 8A3, and it answers your other question. It can be either for the term of this agreement or for the annual term and be renewed each year. So I do anticipate that he would have, I just assumed it would be easier to have insurance that was in place at least annually.
Yeah, okay, that's
And in no event shall an event take place without a valid insurance policy being in effect for the full duration of the event. What we generally do, in fact, even for the shuttle vendor agreement, is he has to provide us, he doesn't get that permit until we have the insurance certificate in hand. So he could promote an event, I suppose, and neglect to give us an insurance certificate, but he doesn't start his event until we have it in hand. And that happened, I don't recall, one of the running events that we had. We waited, and they got it to us that morning, and they were told they were not going to commence without that. So I think they got some insurance agent out of bed or something to get it to us on a
That's
Saturday.
part of something you deal with for every event you've ever
Yes.
done, I'm sure. That's got to be a standard.
It's definitely standard to have an event, have that COI sent in before, any setup or anything starts with an event. It's also pretty common whenever we go in and get insurance, I'll be sending them the dates and everyone that needs to be listed as an additional insured, all made ahead of time.
And I would state the reason that I have a time, like I think one of the ones that you are mentioning that has a time limit on it that we needed, I think it was probably a month in advance, was like the emergency plan. Well, that's because I need to coordinate it with
Right.
fire chief and others.
Yeah.
Insurance certificate, that's a piece of paper that I look, make sure the amount is correct, make sure that we're listed as a co-insured, and that it's signed, and that's it. I mean, once we have it, it's not coordinating with anyone else. So,
So you may have just answered the question, but it was a big question I had, because you have, through this, a list of things that have to be done by a certain time.
yes.
But it was not clear from reading this that what would happen if they didn't do that.
Oh,
So if we're not issuing the final permit until we have those things, then that makes sense, but I didn't see where that was written in this agreement.
Section 8A3, second sentence, however, no event shall any event take place without a valid insurance policy being in effect for the full duration of the event.
Well, that's insurance, but things like the emergency plan and some of the other things that you were listed under 6A, If those are not done, then
Well-
what would happen if you don't have those by the start of the event?
Well, it's a contractual requirement.
Yeah, he has.
Just take the first one out of the first one is kind of a minor thing. It's more of a convenience of giving us a list of individuals associated with the event and their contact information at least 2 weeks prior. That's so we know who to contact. Some of these, like the written emergency plan, subsection 3, submitted to us at least 4 weeks prior to the start of the event. Again, that's because I need to get it approved by the
Yeah.
fire department.
Yeah.
So I just tried to anticipate how much time I needed to do.
Yeah, so
what I needed to do.
my question is, if Slaughter does not follow through on this, and it's a week before the event and you don't have the emergency plan, because it doesn't specify in this that the event can't go ahead.
But it's a contract.
Well,
It
it's
says
a
he has to because it's a contract.
Right, it's a
Okay.
contract. We don't give him his final permit until he's done all of these things. So ideally, in fact, my experience has been with, like there's that half marathon event, May 22nd. It's actually the morning of Stephen Foster's memorial. I already have their insurance certificate. I've had it for, seems like a week or two, or probably longer than that. So, but the day that, when the event comes up, if it's not in on time, then they don't start.
Okay, because I didn't see that specified in this contract.
Well, it's contractual provisions,
Okay.
and I'm the one that signs the permit ultimately, so.
It's
I mean,
basically
if I don't-
Scott's contract management. He's the one that's managing this contract
Right.
on our behalf.
Right.
So he's going to go through, if they don't live up to a term of this contract, they don't do the event. It
And that is the
doesn't
duties of the director
but
to
it-
manage the
it
contract.
doesn't need to be
but-
spelled out.
But it doesn't actually say in here they don't have the event. There's a provision about cancelling the contract for, with 2 weeks' notice, but I didn't see anything about, even if you don't meet the terms of this, you don't have an event. And I wondered if that needed to be specified.
No, not in a contract. It says you have to have this, you have to have that, you have to have this. You don't have to say, I mean, Scott knows contract law and more than we do, how the wording of things, that's how,
Right, I don't issue the final approval until, now, I would say this, though, for instance, take the emergency plan being in at least 4 weeks prior. I mean, if I get that in 3.5 weeks and the
Yeah.
fire chief signs off on it, well, I'm not going to tell him, well, no, you can't
Yeah,
have your
no,
event.
no.
But if it's in late and I can't track down the fire chief to sign it, well, then he's not going to have his event. When I sign that permit, I don't sign that permit until I receive the things that.
Okay.
Okay, so I know I shouldn't be arguing with a lawyer on law,
Well, no.
but, so I had this experience. So and this is when I very first came to this country. I signed a contract with a company that got me my visa and brought me to the US. And I was scheduled to work for them, something like a temp agency. They were going to hire me out and they were going to make money off the top of it. And in that contract, it said what they needed to do, and it said what I needed to do. Well, when I got to New York, it became very clear they were not going to do what they said they were going to do. They got trouble with immigration, they got trouble with their banks. They were not focused on finding me work.
Yeah.
But I went and saw we went and saw a group of us were in this situation. We went and saw an attorney, and he looked at that contract and he said, yes, they have not lived up to their contract, but it doesn't say what
What consequences follow?
what the consequences are for them not following that contract. So there's nothing you can do. You have to hang out and wait and hope that they will find you work eventually. I didn't do that, but that's what I was told. And I just want to make sure we're not in this situation by not having in here, if they don't follow up with what they said, that we have not stated what will happen.
No, what happens, and I don't issue the permit.
yeah, they don't get a permit.
The ball's in my
That's-
court.
Okay.
So,
Hey, Scott,
That's one of your-
how about something like this that I think that would meet the requirements? Is there, I don't remember reading it, but any little statement is, in the event Slaughter does not meet any of the requirements for each event, Parks reserves the right to cancel, I don't know, use your own legal language, but this event, or to postpone this. Just something, one sentence could probably, I think, meet what Sue's trying to get at and solve the whole thing.
And while there's discussions going on, I will look, because I'm rather certain that we've covered that one as well.
Yeah, I kind of, for some
think so,
reason,
too.
I'm
Well, there's a termination clause.
Yes, it's a termination,
Termination
but that's a
clause.
2 weeks' notice. That doesn't cancel an event.
The way I read this thing is it's a per event situation contract telling you in order to be able to have this event, you have to do these things, which means the first, any of those things that you didn't,
You can't have the event.
you can't have the event. That's the automatic. These are our demands that you must meet to do it.
right.
And that's the out. If any one of those isn't met, you don't issue the permit.
See, the difference between your situation, which I'm sure was very frustrating, is that we hold the keys. You know, it's like, let's equate it to, in fact, it is a lease agreement of sorts. We are allowing, if you approve this, we are allowing Slaughter Trail Guides LLC to use a portion of our land for a specific event. So yes, it's like a lease where if you're going to lease a property, that landlord is likely not going to give you those keys until you have done all the things that the lease requires. And that's the point, is we have those keys. They are not allowed to have that event until he's done all of those things, and then we issue a permit. It's just like the permit that I just issued for his renewal. The permit is signed by me. We laminate it, and then we give it to him. He will not get that, and therefore not be able to have his event. And the consequences of that to him is he's put all this money into promoting an event. I don't know what it takes dollar-wise to promote an event, but he does all of that, all of his advertisement. He's got people waiting there, and he's going to go and explain to them, well, I didn't have an insurance certificate, so you can all go home.
Yeah, well, it's not just insurance, it's making sure there's
Well,
bathrooms and the whole
right,
thing.
yeah, but I mean, all of those things are again, we hold the keys. That's what's a little different from your situation,
Okay.
where you came here relying on the goodwill of somebody, and they didn't apparently follow through. Well, if he doesn't follow through, he doesn't have his event.
Okay.
So those consequences are rather immediate. I mean, not to say that I or whoever is the executive director at the time can't drop the ball and just, oh, I forgot to see if, or forgot to get the fire chief to approve this. Sure, I mean, that sort of thing could happen, but that would be
it wouldn't matter whether
my
there was a
failure.
thing in here about it or not.
That would be
Right.
It wouldn't
my
matter.
failure, and you would
Right.
be looking to me, or whoever that commission, or director is at the time, to, in fact, that would probably be his or her last event as the director.
Okay.
Sue, did-
If you're convinced that you do have that right to pull the plug even though it doesn't state.
Oh,
it in the contract.
absolutely.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
without a doubt.
Okay. So my final question, I've actually come to attachment 1, which was the, what you pulled out of the rules and regulations.
Yes.
And I'm really glad you did that. I think this is, I'm glad we didn't give you the 23-page document or whatever that is. But I do have questions. There was quite a number of items that seem to refer to LLCP that aren't here. Like there's nothing against glass containers. There's nothing about having animals in vehicles. There's nothing about bringing snakes in. There's nothing about camping in campsites that are not designated. And I just wondered why we didn't have all those rules that would have seemed to, like they would apply.
That, frankly, because this was, and you weren't a commissioner when those rules were first approved,
Right.
but there were some changes that you suggested, and those were
Yeah, but I think-
subsequently approved. But
But I think a lot of those items I mentioned didn't change, were in both versions.
Right. What I'm trying to get at, though, is the first discussion we actually had two sets of rules for Lake Leatherwood. There were the entire set of rules, and then these were like an abbreviated version that you would hand out to people or that's posted. I could very easily put the entire set of rules, but they were rather lengthy.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that. I was
Well, I'm just thinking,
using
I was just thinking about pulling the ones out with LRSOP, but
Okay.
I mean, if you don't want the general public having glass around the lake, why would we let participants in an event do it? It doesn't seem to make much sense.
He wouldn't.
Well, you
These-
can't, because it's against the
It
rules
says a
anyway.
full set of the rules is available on our website.
Right.
So they have to abide by the full set of rules, not just the ones listed here.
Right.
Oh, well, then this is useless then. We should put the 23 pages back in.
Well, I can do that. Again, this
Just
is,
not give it to all of us.
This-
Just give it to him, and we have a copy, but we don't all
No,
need
but I
it.
mean, he doesn't know, there's several pages at the front of that about payments, so he doesn't need those. But I didn't know, understand why all the ones that relate, I understand just pulling out the ones that relate to Lake Leatherwood, but I didn't understand why they weren't all in there.
I can use it's just going to double the size of the agreement, but I can do that. But as
That doesn't seem necessary.
Commissioner
I think you could-
Ingram,
I think you'd have
These events take place in the park, and those are the park rules.
right. This says this is a summary of the rules that apply to your use of the park. A full set of the rules is available. But it'll take me 10 minutes to print those rules and attach them and
Yeah, I
and
mean,
do
I
this.
think you could have a two-page attachment and it would cover them all, probably.
Either way,
Okay.
I guess my only concern is if somebody's going to make a motion tonight, they're going to say something along the lines of, I move to approve this agreement with the following changes or additions, and you're going to list those things that you want added or removed. And it's very easy to say attach the complete set of rules rather than the summary of the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to have a summary because those rules are really lengthy. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't apply. But I would be confused about this because there's things I think are fairly important that are not even mentioned here that would apply.
Then it's very easy to attach the full set of rules. Okay.
Speaking of, you said that was your last question, correct?
Yeah.
So are you ready, or is someone ready to make a motion about?
Well, can I make a...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
I've got a couple of comments about it as well, and I promise you it's not going to
I forgot
take as
that
long.
there were other
Yeah,
specifics,
and-
sorry.
And probably my comment is not so much questioning this contract. This is my first official meeting here,
Mm-hmm.
and I will just state that I feel responsible to the entire community and not just a certain part of the community by being on this commission. And so I will value that and respect it and always try to look out for everybody. So when I look at this, first off, I'm excited that we're going to have a management company doing stuff out there. I do caution for the community that this is a very diverse community in that we're made up of a whole lot of tourists. We're made up of families. We're made up of artists, musicians, bikers. And when I look at this, this is designed for a sportsman that's out running or doing biking. There's not any mention about having arts festivals out there, or music festivals out there, Easter egg hunts for the community. There's lots of things. That may not be what this is all about, but I hope that as a commission, we focus on that type of stuff. So, because I love what we're doing with the trails. That's awesome. That's probably one of the greatest assets that this Parks Commission has is Lake Leatherwood. And there's a lot more besides just biking events and running events that we should be doing out there. So that's, other than that, I think I agree with everything that we've just changed. I just hope that we encompass a lot more vision and don't just say we've taken care of Lake Leatherwood because we've done this, because there's a lot of other events for other people in this community that would never go to a biking event or something like that.
Sure. And,
And that's a good point. That,
well,
I would
Go
like
ahead,
to
go
add
ahead.
something as well.
let me address it first, and then
Yeah.
and you, if that's acceptable. When we talked about going this route, we made it clear that this contract was only going to be for doing those sorts of events. In fact, I even have restrictions somewhere on the first page, I believe, about that his exclusive agreement is only, in fact, he's not even allowed to promote other sorts of events. That's because we wanted control of those. For instance, we have a couple of native plant hikes coming up out there that we have Eric Fuselier going to lead a few of those. Those are all done through Parks and Recreation. We have a native plant collaborative that we've been working on, even doing some classes on Saturdays at the community center. Those are all things that we wanted to do. What I don't want to be bogged down with is this sort of event. So we're keeping control. And who knows, there may be a time where there's a group, maybe I don't know, the master naturalists or the wild ones or somebody that wants to come in and suggest being a promoter for those sorts of events. But for now, we don't have a group like that that's approached us about that sort of thing. So we'll maintain control of those, and we are. We've got several, like I said, several plant hikes at least that are scheduled for this year, and we've just today scheduled a phone call to schedule the rest for the fall. So we are working on those, and are open to suggestions. We want, as you said, a diverse group of events, and it's just not appropriate to take someone, and no disrespect to you, Mr. Slaughter, but it would not be appropriate to rely on someone with his focus
I agree.
to be involved in really any of those other events.
I just want to make sure we don't check off the list and say Leatherwood's taken care of, because there's so much more, and maybe at a workshop level we can start exploring what else could we be doing in that part. So, but other than that, I think this is great. So.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Anything else?
I think we...
Well, Scott, I think you covered it well. I mean,
okay.
I would just put an exclamation point on what you said, and we definitely aren't, don't want to take a place where we're impeding any of those other things from happening.
I don't know if you're opening this to public comment, but I saw a hand, so I just will point that out.
Who is it? Is it Sharon? Yeah, step up to the mic, please, Sharon. Just so that it gets in the recording.
To your point, and thank you very much, keeping some of the events free from the holiday weekends so that the general community can enjoy the park with their family and friends. 3-day weekends are very important. So I do not know how much of the park is going to be taken. I'm sure there's going to be other parts of the park that would be free for family, but just a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's something actually that we can control, and we still get to approve the dates and whatnot. So that is something that we'll have to keep in mind. Thanks for pointing that out. But that's something that we'll have to definitely consider.
Okay. Anyone else? Mark?
No.
Do you have any events that you had anticipated for any holiday weekends?
The date that's proposed in May falls on Memorial, but we'll only be occupying, a pretty focused area of the downhill trails for one day. Typically, we wouldn't try to do an event on a holiday weekend for obvious reasons, especially in a town like this.
Yeah, it's too
the
crazy.
only reason why this event happened like that is because of how the planning that it's taken to get this event back on the calendar and other events that are happening that we're having to work around. So, but yeah, like I said, obviously, for reasons we would avoid weekends like that. And for the event that's coming up that we hope to host, of course, like you guys will have to approve the date and the site plan. But the idea of the format is it's going to kind of cover multiple footprints throughout the weekend. So we won't be it's not like we're taking up the whole park for the whole weekend. So,
No, that's a good point.
But yeah, no other
We wouldn't want
comments
to.
for
Okay.
me.
Anyone else? Would someone like to make a motion to approve this tonight with the changes that were suggested as part of your motion?
How do we word that?
I was going to go back. I think we really, the only modification really is to add the full rules and regulations, right? With
No,
every-
There were
Can
a
I-
couple little,
Can I go through them and then?
Yeah, why
Yes,
don't you
would
recap that
That
for
would
us,
be
please, Scott?
helpful.
Okay, and then whoever's contemplating making a motion, maybe take a few quick notes. Because again, it would be a motion along the lines of, I move to approve this agreement with the following changes. Section 2C, we talked about dropping the words executive director of
Yeah, that's right.
the, and that you might recall that just puts the,
yes,
to increase events past 5, it's not just the executive director, it's the commission that makes that decision.
Okay, let's be real clear as how we're going to word that, okay? 'Cause to as many as 10 per year by the written authorization of the
Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation.
Eureka Springs
ESPRC.
Parks Commission. Okay.
We did talk about Section 3C, there being a change that wasn't inspected by the manager, but we did clarify that,
Right.
no, the manager is expected to inspect before he
Yes.
calls me to inspect. Section 6A3, adding the following words to the end of that sentence. And that would be comma, and the Eureka Springs Fire Department, period.
So which section again?
Section 6A3, at the end of the last sentence. Then 6A4, at the end of that sentence, adding the word and porta potties. The next change that was discussed would be attachment 1 will include the entire set of rules. Well, actually, we talked about that. Were we in agreement that since it references the full rules, that was acceptable?
I think, I agree with Sue on that one, that
Okay.
what's it going to hurt to give them one set of full rules?
Sure.
You know,
Okay.
it's just
So-
as easy to attach that.
So the next change for the moving party would be attach the full set of LLCP park rules and regulations rather than the abbreviated rules that are currently in place. And that's it.
All right.
Do we still have Commissioner Rowley available?
I think he's there.
Ah,
Yes.
there he is.
Oh, good.
Then I am going to make a motion to approve this contract with the following changes. Let me get Section 2C, adding Eureka Springs Parks Commission to the end of that sentence. Go through and make sure I get them all. Section 6A3, adding and the Eureka Springs Fire Department. Section 6A4, adding and porta potties. And in attachment 1, attaching the full set of LLCP rules and regulations as opposed to the abbreviated version.
Okay, everybody clear on that? Do I have a second?
second.
Bren? Mark? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 And I'm a nay.
Aye.
Kevin is aye, Bren is aye, Mark is aye, Sue is nay. Motion passes 3-1.
But it can't pass 3-1.
You're right, I just realized that I have to vote,
No,
right? 1, 2,
Yeah, you.
3. So chair votes aye. Motion passes 4-1. Okay, the contract is approved. What's next? Oh, let me get my agenda here. Oops, I lost my agenda. Here is it. Where is it?
Basin Park.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I can get the printer to work over here. Okay. Consideration of the contract for Basin Park Engineering is our third item on new business.
This one should be rather straightforward. It's been an issue that's been before us for about a year now, it seems. We had a request for proposals to try to find an engineering firm to deal with the, let's say, structural issues of Basin Park, namely, or the main one being a known collapse of a culvert underneath the plaza, which has prevented us from restoring the stonework at the fountain. So we went through a request for proposals. The winner was McClellan Consulting Engineers Incorporated. The negotiations were rather quick because the city has this engineering firm on retainer, not retainer, but they have a model contract that already has hired them, so all we do is work orders to define the work that we're doing. And I think we went over this in the workshop. You each have had this for about a month, I think. And so I think it's rather straightforward. I could break down the work that would be done, but Article 2 identifies the 4 basic deliverables that we are seeking. And what I like about this too is that we have not to exceed prices. So although they will bill their hourly rates, they have given us caps on all of that. So I do like that idea.
Scott, what are the hourly rates?
I'm sorry, say
What are the hourly rates?
You know, we had that, there was a rate sheet that we had. I don't have that with me
At the
tonight.
workshop, we had it,
Yeah,
didn't
at the
we?
workshop, there was the complete rate sheet. I don't have that with me now, but it's the rates that were agreed upon
Yeah,
with the city.
I don't think I got a copy of that.
Okay, I can't answer that question, but it's the rates that are part of the city's contract with them, so this defines the scope of work.
And then, can you clarify where they'll be working? So I know a lot of this is around the central flat part of
Yes.
Basin Park, where the
Yes.
tunnels collapsed, but it's talking about collecting information on the park. So will they be doing things outside that area? Or?
Well, there are not, I mean, you say outside the park?
No, it's, I mean, going up the slope or around
Yes.
the bandstand.
Yes, in fact, I've done a walkthrough with them. There's a number of issues, including the stone walls that are failing. I shouldn't say failing, but let's say showing movement that needs to be assessed. So doing that, there are some issues behind the band shell with the way the water flows and causes water damage in the band shell and situations like that. So they're looking at the entire park, but also we'll be looking at historic issues. For instance, we have some issues like railings, or is there something that we can do for handicap accessibility, for instance? And so they'll look at issues like that, but also try to meld that with historical issues. So yes, it is more than just doing the one known issue of the collapse underneath that fountain area.
Okay. So, for instance, with the bandstand, they'll be looking at kind of the structure, the foundation,
Yes,
and water issues.
yes.
But we'll leave it to the architect to design the bandstand. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There will be some areas of overlap In fact, I had hoped to present the engineering contract at the same time as potential contracts with architects, but I just got, like a day ago, the second proposal from the other architect. Excuse me. But yes, they will have to coordinate their efforts. An architect, for instance, might draft or might draw a design of some sort for anything. Could be the plaza, could be the band shell. And the engineers can look at that and say, well, no, that's not structurally sound. And obviously an architect is going to know how to design a building that's structurally sound, but the engineers are the ones that crunch the numbers and make sure the details of the structural issues are done. So they're going to have to cooperate. Yes.
Okay, so in the main flat area where you walk around Basin Park, who will be designing what the actual surface that you walk on looks like? Is that the engineer or the architect?
Again, a little of both, because the architect is going to be looking at more at the aesthetic issues, whereas the engineer would be looking at things like what kind of foundation do we actually have underneath the fountain, for instance, or somebody, a previous engineer had mentioned possibly using post-tension concrete, which has some limitations. But the point is, those are things that an engineer would design, and yet the look of it, the aesthetics of it, do we have stamped concrete, or do we have some other sort of surface? Do we have the planters here where they currently are, or do we have the Doughboy statue where it is, or are we going to move it because it's in the way? Those are things that are more architectural, and decisions that the architect makes might affect something that the engineer has to do. So they play together. It'll be a team.
Okay.
If they're going to move, again, just since I mentioned that, the Doughboy, well, there may need to be a foundation to accommodate the weight of that, not just the statue, but the base that it's on. So no, it's going to be a combined effort, and of course the commission will be involved. I would imagine. Well, I know that the historical preservation people will be involved. There'll be a lot of players in this. The engineer's primary focus is on the structural issues.
Anything else? Questions?
Well, I guess my question would be, what do you need from us tonight on this work order? Anything,
Ideally,
or just presenting it.
It's just approving this, so we can sign it and get them started.
You have a motion to approve it?
Scott?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Scott?
Yes.
Kevin, I don't see anything in this contract that either identifies which is the primary consultant, either the architect or the engineer, or that they are required to coordinate with each other.
I can go back.
And you never have, I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it is normal that there is a lead consultant on any project. Somebody has to be the primary contact, and they have to have responsibilities clearly defined between what the engineer's scope of work is and what the architect's scope of work is, and where the two of them meet. If it's not included in the contract, then they have no contractual obligation to each other.
I understand. Possibly the thing to do, now that I have both proposals from the architects, is that we address this in the next workshop, and we can address the engineers, the architects, possibly even have them present to answer questions and identify issues like that. Probably makes sense to have the architects be the lead consultants, but
Well, we brought on the engineers as the lead consultant. That was the whole intent of hiring them first. because the issues that they have to go in and identify are going to drive a lot of the work that gets done eventually.
Yes. On the other hand, if the architect designs something that's going to affect, or need a foundation, or, there was talk about the post-tension concrete or something like that an architect would, I guess the architect is designing not just the things that are visible, but I mean predominantly the things that are aesthetic and visible above ground, et cetera. Not exclusively, I understand that, but in other words, what we're ultimately going to end up seeing is predominantly the architect, but...
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Okay. Most of this is engineering. The stone walls are all engineering. The plaza. I mean, this was why we hired an engineer in the first place, was because most of the issues that we have there are engineering-driven issues. And even if you're going to bring an architect in as a consultant on the aesthetic issues, there's nothing in this contract that says that the engineers are in any way obligated to work with them.
What are you proposing then that we? Because this is the first.
Typically, when you hire it, typically if you hired the engineer to start this project, then he would have hired an architect as a consultant to do the work when we start executing designs. And he would be a sub-consultant to the engineer. And if you look back when we did the RFP, most of the work that they did that incorporated architectural design, the architect was a sub-consultant to them.
Well, then we'll have to table this one. I'm sorry.
I mean, and I apologize. I wasn't able to be at the workshop, but I was a bit confused why you were seeking RFPs from architects when we hadn't gotten any of the assessment work done from the engineer.
Well, we didn't issue RFPs for the architects. All we have at this stage from the architects are their qualifications and their rates. So there's not even any proposed contracts at this point. We had.
Have you had conversations with McClelland about how an architect would integrate into the work that they have been contracted to do?
I have not, no.
Okay, that would be a good first step.
Okay, so we will table this then. I will elicit some input from them, and then at our next workshop we can answer that key question.
Okay.
Okay, I agree. Table the contract consideration for the engineering, and you're going to be in touch with McClelland and see what...
Yes. Does that require a motion, or we're just tabling the item?
No, we don't need a motion for that.
Okay.
Okay, new business number 4, consideration of plan for trail modifications. Sam Dudley, you're on.
With the fresh haircut and everything.
Yep.
Pass these out.
Yes. I have a black and white copy. I'm glad you brought color copies there, because it said it referred to the red line and it didn't have any color.
Very technologically advanced.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any different from what I have here.
Everyone should have a copy.
Hey, good.
Yeah, I got it on my phone. Nice.
Absolutely not, Sharon. I'm not Sharon. Hey, guys.
Hi, Sam.
Essentially, I guess what I'm here for tonight is to answer any questions, and then also just kind of asking for approval to move forward with anything that it's all really kind kind of dependent upon grants, whether or not we can get those or not. So none of this is for sure going to happen, but these are big plans that I've talked with certain members of the NWA Trailblazers with, and the temperature is lukewarm on whether or not we will get any of this done, but I figured might as well approach you guys first, and that way if any of that money does come to us and we can get these things approved through them, you guys are already aware of what's happening and what the plans are, and have had a chance to look things over, and it doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, if that makes sense. I don't know, have you guys had a chance to look over any of the document? I don't know if I should go over the things or just start answering questions.
I don't know, just for the record, do you want to maybe summarize, just
Yeah, so
your little...
Well, Sam, if I may suggest, if you would just do you have like area 1. If you would just go area by area is what you're proposing.
That makes sense. So obviously I'm the trails coordinator, so I'm out there a lot, and I hear a lot of the input from guests about the trails, and a lot of it's good, but there are some areas obviously where the system is lacking. The connectivity just isn't there for obvious reasons. Area 1 is the lake loop. I called it the lake loop because, you can use, on the western side, you can use Beecham or Fuller or the Shoreline Trail, or, there's a number of ways to get over to the dam. But essentially, it all becomes a lake loop when you cross and go over to the east side of Beecham and come back around. So that's what I refer to the lake loop as. And the dam was closed for pedestrian, any kind of use other than parks employees are allowed to go across it. I believe Scott told me today that we had an assessment done by, who was that? Who did
NRCS.
The NRCS agreed that we should not be allowing anyone across the dam for any recreational purposes. And it makes sense. I mean, it looks terrible. And having kids now, I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'd let my child go on that dam. It's terrifying. So we are kind of stuck with I call it a kink in the system. It's just like you can't get across. And the whole point of the lake loop is to make it a loop and experience the whole lake. And so the recommended fix for that, which I went out with Uriah from the Trailblazers. He's one of their trail guru guys, and we went down there, and there's actually an access road. If you go just past the dam and you stay on the Beecham access road portion, if you go just past that, like 10 or 15 feet, there's an access road that goes all the way down to the creek. It's pretty minimal grade. It's not steep. It's easy to hike, easy to use for anyone, cyclists, hikers, whatever. That would take you down to the creek, and then obviously there's the financial restraint of actually building a bridge down there, but that seems to be the most practical thing to do. Even with the dam being fixed, which could be years, you still have the issue of you're putting people on a dam that's 100 feet up in the air, and it's intimidating. It's kind of scary if you're not used to that sort of thing. I can see how, when I was 20, I'd go across it no problem, but as you get older, you start getting vertigo when you go on the swings. And so walking across the dam, and it gets really windy on the lake as well. So that's just, I think it would be a better experience for all park users. And eventually the dam will become another option once the hand railings are fixed and it's deemed safe. But we have no idea when that could be. So we have to come up with something, or we just resign to the fact that it's just not going to be a loop anymore. And I find that way too sad.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
I would assume the cost of a bridge should be relatively the same as what we paid for the last one if we want to use the same contractors. So this probably won't be paid for by us anyway, so it'll probably be paid for by, if anyone, by the Walton Family Foundation through the Trailblazers. So if you guys are okay with that option, I would love to take you guys out. It's hard to describe and show you if you haven't been down there. I'd love to take some commissioners down there and show. I think probably Kevin, Commissioner Ruley, has been down there most likely, but I'm not sure if anyone else has. So hard to explain without seeing it, but it's really beautiful down there. It's like
I think it
totally different
would
environment.
doing that, going down there.
Yeah, schedule a walk down there
I
with
think
Sam.
it would be great to do that. As I was reading this document the whole time, I kept thinking, I should know what he's talking about.
Well, that's what I was sort of afraid of. I was like,
But
how many of these, how many of y'all are going to
I've looked
actually
down there from
know?
the top of the dam, but I haven't gone down there. So.
It goes, the access road is, obviously there's a little burned-in trail that goes right alongside the dam. That's not what I'm referring to. It's an access road, actually, that it's much less steep, and it's a very gradual descent down to the creek. So, and then on the other side, there's something very similar that I've checked out before as well with a friend of mine back in the past. And it's all our property, and it puts us really close to Highway 23 or 187, whichever one. And that could open up some possibilities of, if we can find a landowner who's open to having a connection to Lake Leatherwood. I mean, that gives us, do any of you guys live in Holiday Island or near there? No. I mean, thousands of people live up there, and, essentially you would be giving them much easier access to the park than what they currently have. Because right now they got to drive down and drive all the way through town, and it's really weird when you can see Lake Leatherwood as you're coming down the hill from Holiday Island, but then you have to go and around the whole town. It's like, oh, I just saw Lake Leatherwood, now I have to drive all the way around. That's weird. So
Let's schedule a walk then. You want just commissioners? You want to invite the public too?
anyone. I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
public. or-
I would recommend inviting the public. It'd be a good chance to reach out to them, and anybody who would show up may well have some good ideas. They'd probably be a
Yeah.
user. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
One other question for this, Sam, is have y'all put together any numbers at all, what this would cost, whether we get money for it or grants or not for it, like what?
Like I said, I mean, all the trail work is, I mean, as far as this particular fix is, it's there. I mean, it's access roads, so it's pretty minimal, and the stuff that is there could be done in-house. I mean, so that's not really,
So the bridge is
the bridge is the thing.
Sam, is there a possibility of it being safe to wade across there? I know it depends on water level, but...
I really would not want to, in that particular location, definitely not. I mean, you can kind of skirt across the creek, so to speak, right below the dam. But the trail to get down there and the trail to get back up the other side, especially, is like...
Yeah, I've done it. I understand the issue.
Billy Goat, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
you have to,
I understand the issue of opening that up.
Unlike the headwaters that, that creek will dry up. The water here tends to flow continually because it's backed up by the lake, and it releases more slowly, so you
Right.
have
But
more
there are times of year when there's no water going over the dam.
It's rare, but yeah, I mean, it's
Well,
less common than not having water in upstream.
Yeah, I would say it's not, I wouldn't say it's rare, but it probably is for a limited number of months. Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned, I'm just pulling it up on a map
Yeah.
so I can see exactly where this thing sits. I think sometimes you got to look bigger than the current problem. And when you're talking about the Waltons or anybody else, they've been very aggressive in doing great things for this community out there. Honestly, opening up, if we did some research and found out who owns access points over there and got a dollar value of what it would do to open up access from Highway 23 into that park, could be huge for that park and for this community. And they may be willing to do something like that with us if...
Well, I would I would hesitate to say that. The funding that we get is through the NWA Trailblazers, not the Walton Foundation.
Okay, so yes,
And the NWA Trailblazers mission is trails.
trails.
It's not roads. And a road going through there is a little more problematic because the road would have to cross the creek down there.
Would it,
Oh, I don't think anyone's talking about a road going down there.
would the
Just
road have to come there, or just a parking area down there to where you access a trail?
Well, for example, I've talked
Well-
with Nick Cross, who owns Bear Creek Nursery, and they're very pro-trail. He's a mountain biker and hiker, and he's a real kind of Eagle Scout kind of guy. You know, he loves being outside. Anyway, they've very open to the idea of, you know, potentially letting people park at Bear Creek Nursery and then having an access trail that goes, so we wouldn't have to be supplying like, you know, another parking area per se. It would have hardly any impact on, you know, our, the park's property. It would be someone else's property where they could park and come in. It would drum up business for them too. It'd be a good PR move for them as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, though, to put in major trails, we should have a good, you know, recent master plan. And that's something we're talking about doing, but haven't done yet, implemented yet. Obviously, maintenance doesn't take in requirements. I think the things a lot of what Sam's talking about is kind of an in-between. We have immediate problems that we need to address. It obviously doesn't make sense to wait for a master plan to put in the, you know, the trail he's talking about.
Right.
But when it comes to putting in max access from other areas, and it can be problematic having access that isn't on land that we control. So I think that may be something we should put off to the future. I think it's a good suggestion. Keep it in mind, but we shouldn't. That may not be something we want to do without a lot of thought going into it.
We would definitely get like an MOU and, you know, the right contract signed, and it would be sort of like how we did with the Oil Springs Trail, where we take over the maintenance of it, but it's not really our property. That'd be sort of a mutually beneficial agreement that we could have, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
I'm
agree.
just saying
We
that maybe
should-
something for the future.
It's not it's not top of my priority list for
Yeah.
sure.
No, it's an interesting idea. I think it's definitely worth considering. But
And it's just mentioned in your thing as you know, there's an access point.
Right.
Would provide, it's not necessarily your goal, your exact goal in here, just mentioned. So,
And then obviously, the lake loop has another issue on the south side. I don't know if you guys have been back there recently, but it's gone. Like the trail's gone.
Sam, I'm not sure what you mean. I hiked it probably 2-3 weeks ago, and I took that little upper section, came down to an area where you've always had to cross the creek, and it was actually wider, but it was narrower. I found it actually easier to cross than it was last year, and then I carried on my way.
I guess we differ.
Yeah, the lower trail, the lower section didn't look passable at all.
That was not passable, but also like I mean, for people who might not be used to that or who aren't really sure what to do, especially if it just had rained the night before or something.
Right.
The water level's really high. I mean, Scott and I were out there looking at that when I took you out there, and there's a couple. I was on the other side of the creek, and they had gotten to the point where it had gotten all washed out and it's full of, you know, these big pools of water, and they were just like, we don't know where to go, and we were just having to yell at them from across the trail, just like, you got to pick somewhere, and just your feet are going to get wet. And for me, that doesn't really.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends, because I think for the more serious hikers around here, they're pretty used to having water shoes with them and crossing creeks.
And there's a lot of those smaller creek crossings that are.
Yeah, and probably for a lot of people going all the way around the lake, they're probably fairly serious. It's a little ways. But I agree, for the more casual people that are just out there for a quick trip, that is more of an issue. Yeah.
And it's only, I mean, you know, the reason why I'm bringing it up too, I'm not saying it's not navigable at all, but the fact is it's only going to get worse from here. I mean,
we don't know we don't have control. We don't know what's going to happen there.
It's going to, you can tell the lake is starting to back up even more. It's starting to kind of eat up into that trail. Like you said, that lower trail is no longer there anymore. So that's a sign that we should probably think of something before, you know.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to be planning for the future.
Yeah.
If I could make a comment or two on this, the issue a big issue is that we've lost the stream bed there. It's now become more almost like a delta situation. And so the two of you said, well, we disagree, and probably not. I mean, that it changes so frequently.
Right,
Now, there's the problem.
Yeah.
And I would point out that we do have Sandy Formica from the WCRC coming to the next workshop. That's the Watershed Conservation Resource Center. She's going to explain the grant, as Sue had asked. So she's coming at the next workshop, or at least is planned on doing so. And their role in, if we get that grant, they were likely going to be hired to do the stream bed assessment there. And what maybe isn't clear yet is what Sam is talking about, is bringing these trails up to where we have more of a stream bed, where we have banks on either side, where you could put a bridge across it versus a large sort of wetland sort of situation that's going to change frequently.
Yeah.
And so Sandy can comment on what that would take to assess that. And so less of those sorts of issues down below the dam, but up here, we really, especially if we're going to do a very expensive stream bed and lake assessment, we definitely want to make sure. In fact, if we were going to do this, we would probably want to hire them to do that portion of the assessment in advance and make sure we're not causing more problems. But my point is that she will be here in 2 weeks, and maybe we...
I think, Scott, the thing to do is put this part of the conversation off until that progresses much further along.
Yes.
Yes, I think
Should we not try to schedule the walk, though, before that workshop?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see
Yeah, because
next
that's the Lake Loop, Area 1 that he's talking about, that's something that I think we need to do anyway. What I'm saying is this upper part has a whole lot of issues that we want to make sure we do right. So as Commissioner Rulli said, I think that it makes sense for us to get a whole lot more information on this portion of it.
Right. But Sam, sorry, I don't want to speak for you, but I think Sam also had a proposal on here as kind of a brownish, purplish line that goes up from that area and then comes up closer to where the old shuttle was, the bottom of Miners Rock. And that's something that could potentially be done because it would be out of that area we're
Yes.
talking about. So we maybe should keep that open for consideration.
Oh, and that access road exists. That's actually, I mean,
It's already there.
yeah, it's already there.
Okay.
It's fine. I use it occasionally, but the problem is you get down to the bottom of it, and the creek is usually too high to, I mean, except for, July and August, it's usually too much water in it to cross right there. But it'd be a perfect place for a bridge.
Yep.
I know we talk about bridges and bridges and bridges, but when you have a creek running through the middle of your park, you kind of have to,
Make it safe.
yeah, unfortunately.
What about Area 2, the Miners Rock thing you have here?
Yeah, so this is something I know a lot of, I mean, having lived here my whole life, but, definitely the portion when I moved back here from Utah, and I got to see the gravity trail gravity project being built, and kind of what it did to the community was, might be irreparable. But, I mean, I'm glad it's there, but it was done in a way that was, things were not delivered that were promised, unfortunately. And one of the things was retaining the old Miners Rock Trail in its entirety. I mean, whether that meant, a few little reroutes and flyovers, obviously that was going to happen, but because only 2 of the 6 flyovers ended up being built, we essentially are left with a trail that is very unfamiliar and doesn't have the same qualities and sort of the same positive experience that we used to have. I mean, like I said in the summary, it's still being used as an access road, the old Miners Rock, so it's still intact, and it'd be pretty easy to open back up, but it's just we have to get the flyovers done. So this is something I talked with the Trailblazers about, potentially doing that, and it would just clean up the system a lot as well. It would make it a lot less confusing, and one of the things that they are a big fan of is more beginner-friendly trail. And so I know Sue, you've mentioned issues on the Miners Rock multi-use trail where it's like these are huge banked turns and it looks like you go really fast. And it's like, well, that's because the same company that built all the downhill trails are the ones that built the climbing trail. And so they built it in a way that's like, it's almost promoting people to go super fast and ride it as, like a downhill trail. And so one of the things that I talked to, and I will understand if it gets shot down, but there's potential to actually use that trail if we get the flyovers as a DH trail, a green DH trail. We could reopen the northern portion of the Miners Rock Bench and actually build a better loop, in my opinion, and a loop that actually includes the entirety of the Miners Rock Bench, because right now you kind of go to this spot and everything north of that purple line, that blue trail, is like probably the most beautiful portion of Miners Rock, but it hardly ever gets used because people don't really know what's over there, and they see the loop and they want to just complete the loop. But if we could include that and then wrap another trail that's more appropriate for that kind of user, essentially like a more single track trail without banked turns, berms and jumps and booters and all that, it would be a better experience for everyone, I think. And it would allow us to, the reality is the downhill trails do bring us, the shuttle services at least, bring us quite a bit of money, and it pays for a portion of my job at least. And with only one green downhill trail available, we're kind of missing a market, for families that come here, and there's only one trail that's like appropriate for them to ride. I've seen a lot of people show up and they do one or two rides and they're done. So having that other option would be beneficial, I think. But I can understand how more DH lines probably leaves a little bit of a bitter taste in anyone's mouth at this point. So it's an option. But the flyovers, I think, will be, I'll go after those regardless, whether or not, those other trail modifications happen. But
Sam, would you clarify what you mean by flyovers, or people that might not know what you're talking about?
yeah. So if you how many of you guys have done the Miners Rock Trail? Have you guys hiked that or biked that?
I have.
Okay. So yeah. It's essentially a place where it can go either way. It can be vice versa, but the way they built them for the two that they actually built, the XC, hiking trail goes underneath, and then there's a trail that goes over the top. The downhill trail goes over the top of the XC trail. Therefore, it eliminates any kind of, collisions or injuries like that from happening. Separates them essentially. They can cross paths without,
So to clarify, somebody using the downhill trail would be going over a bridge of sorts that would allow somebody to be using Miners Rock Loop Trail and not be concerned about a bike screaming by at
Exactly. But like I said, it could go, if the situation called for it, there's also the opportunity to make it to where the hiking trail could go up and go over the downhill trail, which would actually be kind of cool in my opinion.
Nice.
I mean, it'd be like kind of neat to, during these events, Slaughter was just in here talking about all these events, like how cool would it be to have, a place where you can go up there and watch your kids go down the trails and take photos. But it's sort of a situational thing. It'll be dependent upon what, engineers decide on how to make it the most affordable and practical. So.
But the point is, it would keep fast-moving downhill bikes from directly crossing a path that a hiker would be
Yeah, it'd be
on.
the same as DH2 and DH3,
What about the slow ride elimination?
Yeah, also with Miners Rock, I wanted to talk about the bottom as well. And this is actually really pertinent because I got a guy coming over tomorrow to talk about potentially building a boardwalk across the the tunnel, down below the tunnel. Kevin, you spoke to this a while. Yeah, and so that's something that Chuck Woods, who's a contractor with the Trailblazers, he's gonna come measure with me tomorrow morning and see what we need. And essentially that would allow, geez, I really wish I could take you guys out there.
I think you should.
Okay.
Well,
Essentially, there's going to be a trail
honestly,
that goes,
Sam-
oh, sorry, yeah, go
Sam,
for
I
it.
think the appropriate thing to do with this would be to schedule it for a workshop and have photographs and have enough information that people can understand what you're talking about. Because there's a lot of complexity, especially down at the bottom there, because it's completely blind to everybody. And it's where the downhillers enter onto the multi-use trail is through 2 steep berm turns and a drop. So they're never going to do it slowly. And that downhill 7 needs to be turned, go back up a couple hundred feet, turn it around the bench and tie it into the bottom of downhill 6, completely separate the downhill trails from feeding into any of the multi-use trails.
That makes sense. Yeah, if that's something we can get Jagged Axe back out here, that'll definitely be something that we'll, they kind of pick it apart line by line. We could have them look at that kind of ASAP, and plus,
And then
that
at
slick
the
rock's
bottom,
not very fun.
down at where everything comes together at the bottom, it would be a relatively easy matter to separate out the bikes from the downhills from the cross-country hiking trails. Right now, it just kind of, everything dumps into the tunnel. It's going to require crosswalks being painted on both ends of the tunnel across the road, and putting up caution signs, but not trying to force everybody through the tunnel to get to the trails.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the biggest flaw with everything they did.
Yeah.
My dad's friend, Steve Holst, who does the striping here in town, if you know Steve, he's a character. But he said he could come out and paint crosswalks on the road for us while he's here, and it would be substantially cheaper. Not like, it's not a matter of thousands of dollars, but, it would be convenient for him to come and do it. It's $400 or $500 maybe to do 2 crosswalks. I'd have to talk with Dwayne about getting the signage for those crosswalks and what we need for that. But yeah, and essentially crossing the road before you approach the tunnel, and then there's an area back behind the shuttle turnaround. There's plenty of real estate back there. We could build a little trail that goes down below the tunnel, the turnaround, and then it would connect back, and it would give you a full loop. It's really hard to explain unless you guys come out there, but.
And to what Kevin just said, Sam, he's right. We should have a specific workshop where you can go over this more detail with some pictures after we've had a chance to walk, to make sure commissioners know. Maybe might be easier for you to give us all this information.
Yeah.
All sitting down together.
Yeah, for
Can you
sure.
do that?
Yeah, that works.
It's
As
great.
far as
It's
slow
really
ride
great.
elimination, I know that's like pretty,
It's really great. All this information is really good. I think it'd be really good to focus just on it and have
yeah,
chance.
for sure.
Would that be the next workshop then, or?
Well, the next
that
workshop, we've
in-
got some other things going on with, we talked about the contract for
The engineer and architects?
engineer, and
And Sandy Formica.
Sandy Formica, she come to the workshop or meeting?
This doesn't
Workshop.
have to be a workshop either. We're not going to go out there at 6 o'clock at night anyway, right? We could just schedule a day where people are available, and,
You're right, we can just do that, schedule a walk where we can.
yeah,
we can
no
take our-
offense, but I don't want to go out there at 6 o'clock at night.
No, I don't either. I want to schedule a time where we can go out there with you, we can take our little notes, and we can have
Yeah.
questions that the public wants to come to, they can see it.
Okay.
That's
I'd
a better
like to do
idea.
it just because I'd like to do it anyway. Even if you
Yeah.
didn't have these suggestions, I'd like to do it with
Yeah.
somebody who knows every trail and what they're doing. And it certainly helps when you're sitting up here and you've actually done them all.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Check your schedule.
Yeah. Sam, I want to really thank you for putting together this. Was a great report.
It is great.
They're all good ideas, whether we do them or not. They're all good, worth considering, and I really appreciate your thoughts.
Can I get through the last two things? Because
Sure.
Yeah.
just while I have you guys here, Katie's already going to kill me for being here this late, so I might as
It's
well
really
just,
late, that's why I
yeah,
was trying to kind of keep us going, I'm sorry.
just delaying my imminent death here. So the slow ride elimination, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about slow ride. It just doesn't serve much of a purpose anymore.
You don't need it anymore.
Now that the bridge is where it is, it's like, you know, as the trails coordinator, I feel like I want to make sure the work that I'm putting into trails are for trails that are going to be used and are getting, you know, I don't see slow ride being a huge part of the system,
Yeah,
so.
I agree. It seems like a lot of trails in a little area there, and we should eliminate at least one.
Yeah, and they're kind of in a high grass
How do you
growth
go about
area.
eliminating them, though, actually? Some, do you just block them off? Do you
I just stop weed eating
stop
them.
weeding it, just let?
I mean, the grass down there is,
Yeah,
that's
gotcha.
part of the reason. If it was a bench trail up high where, you know, you didn't get a whole lot of vegetation, I'd be like, well, it's okay, but given where it's at, it's like, I mean, I'm down there 5 or 6 times a year, a season, and that's like a whole day of, you know, or at least half a day of weed eating, and it's just like, I never see anyone on it, really. I mean, maybe there's a few people here and there, but honestly, I don't see the,
I don't think it's necessary the way it used to be.
oh, sorry, oh, yeah.
Is that Sharon again?
It's Sharon again.
Yes, Sharon, go ahead.
Sam, I would ask that you consider that some of us hikers now use that because of the bike traffic on the new bridge.
Ah, okay, good to know.
Okay. Okay.
Good to
I'm
know.
sorry, I was
Thank
putting that together in my head. I was like, okay. There's a couple more things. Sorry, I know it's late. The map modifications, I kind of threw down just a quick paragraph to, I really like the way that we used to do the maps, whereas valley trails versus ridge trails. I know it's not what's in style now. I know it's not the things that, you know, most cyclists are used to seeing, but as many of the hikers have pointed out, it's like distinguishing easy versus intermediate trails here is like, it's very cyclist-centric, I guess is the term. I feel like all of our trails also, like we don't really have any easy trails that even if you are a cyclist, it's like there's spots on Hyde Hollow where I'm like, oh geez, like that's not beginner friendly at all. Even if it is low elevation, there's spots where you could get hurt. A lot of creek crossings, a lot of technical little punchy climbs and stuff. But, you know, as far as just how to distinguish the map and like separate the experience, I think the ridge trail versus valley trails offers more of that. It kind of lets the user know like what they're going to get into if you're going to be hanging out around the facilities, around low elevation gain areas, around the lake or the Leatherwood Trail, versus like getting back up into the mountains and having a different style of hike or ride. And honestly, all of our trails are, from a cyclist view, they're all about intermediate level to advanced. So, I mean, it's not like, I don't see much point in distinguishing easy versus intermediate in that respect either, but except for the downhill trails, obviously. But something to think about.
Sam, if I can, the rationale behind using this nomenclature is that it's the exact same map nomenclature that's being used on all of the trail systems in Northwest Arkansas. And the idea was that anybody who's used any of those trails, and most of those are multi-use trails as well, just like Hobbs, would find it easily understandable rather than having a completely different system from anywhere else. And that includes the Marble Flats and Passion Play trails, which use the same map nomenclature.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the standardization. I mean, I think that's something to think about. I guess I feel like our trail system doesn't necessarily meet a lot of the standards due to the terrain. It's like it's very rugged terrain compared to a lot of other, compared to Passion Play, which was more modern built, by machines and whatnot. These are more hand-cut trails. It's just an idea. I personally like it better, and you can explain what you mean by ridge trails versus valley trails in a little more depth. I think one of the maps down at the park I looked at it, and it does have like a short paragraph saying like, what does it mean by ridge trail? And you can kind of explain a little bit more about that. And maybe there's a way to do both. I mean, maybe there's a way to include, you know,
Say
a
different maps
green,
for different
blue, and
purposes, sure, why not?
you know, ridge trail and
That was going to be
whatnot,
my question.
Yeah, why can't you do both?
It's been experienced by different people. Some are bikers. That's what they do. They travel all over doing all these bike trails. Seems that consistent maps trail guides would make sense. But for the local person who's going out there and just riding around or
Yeah.
taking their kids and next thing you know, they're on a cliff, maybe not the best thing. So
Yeah.
maybe you do both?
Yeah, I think I was one of the people that commented to Sam about it being bike-centric. And my objection was you put the classification system on that says this is a bike trail, but there was nothing to say this is also a hiking trail. It didn't even say it was multi-use. So I think if we do go back to the classification system, we need to find a way to make sure it's clear that it is also hiking trails in addition to bike trails.
I agree.
Yeah. I think, yeah, multi-use or shared trails,
Yeah,
some kind of
yeah,
distinguishing word.
Yes.
And then the Twin Knobs renaming, this is something I do need y'all's vote for tonight. If you don't want to, this is not so much a consideration thing, because a few of you guys might not even know what this is referring to. But essentially, there's a section of Twin Knobs that goes all the way down to Hyde Hollow. And right now, it's very confusing if you go up there and you're not familiar with the system. It took me a long time, even living here, to figure out what exactly Twin Knobs was. Not to mention the name itself is kind of, yeah, anyway. So that purple line, if you go to that last page, page 8, it connects Bench Loop to Hyde Hollow. I really think it would clear a lot of things up if we could rename that small section of trail. I mean, it would essentially not, it would mean that Twin Knobs wasn't sharing Bench Loop for that large of a portion, which is very confusing for users, I think, because you have a loop trail that also has another trail that is not a loop, and it's a point A to point B on very different sections of the park. So essentially, the best idea I could come up with is Hidden Falls. I think there's a waterfall down there. It's a kind of a reclusive trail, so to speak, like it's hard to get to, and so hidden seemed like a good word. And then it would essentially, like, Twin Knobs would not share that section with Bench Loop anymore, and it would be just Bench Loop, which sounds sort of like, yeah, whatever, but it is very confusing.
I've not been out there. I'm looking forward to going there. But when I looked at this, I was reminded, seriously, a few minutes ago, of downtown Atlanta, where there's Peachtree this, Peachtree that. And I was looking at this thinking, which trail is this? Because you've got multiple names on the same trail all the way down and saying. So I agree with what you're saying. It doesn't make sense the way it is.
Yeah, and I've hiked it recently. So Scott had put out a potential version of the new trail map, and I thought maybe the signs up there are not going to be that great because I know how confusing this area is, but I thought at least it should match the map. And I actually came back thinking the way it's signed right now, it's impossible to make the map match. Because you have trails, if you look at it going one way, it's both. If you look at it going the other way, it's only one. So the same section is labeled differently depending on which way you approach it. So I definitely think some of those trails. And it is, I mean, I understand that area enough to hike it and find my way around. And having that little section that you're talking about, Sam, going down to Hyde Hollow, never made any sense that it was Twin Knobs. It never appeared to be that at all. And it was not near other parts of Twin Knobs.
I think it does, I think it confuses more than...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're like, wait a minute,
Yes.
I remember seeing Twin Knobs, but it was way back there. Why am I at Twin Knobs again?
Yeah, you're walking by Bench Loop and you just see all these twin knobs going off and it doesn't make any sense.
I think that if you have to look back at the way the trails were developed, and the Twin Knobs were the trails that went up and down the fall line, and Bench Loop was the one that looped around on the bench. That's where those names came from. they've evolved somewhat over time, and some of the links between them have been added since the trails were originally added, because a lot of them were old road beds. The thing that makes it confusing, and this is no different than where 23 and 62 share. When you come 62 and 23 come through, and it's the same road from Plainer Hill to where the new traffic circle is going to go. It gets confusing when you try to name both of them. And this is something I discussed with Scott early on in the signing, is that the easiest thing to help people navigate is to number the intersections. Put the numbers on the posts on the intersections and put them on the map, because it's an immediate landmark reference as to where you are. It doesn't really matter what the name is. So, I mean, I'm not passionate one way or the other. You can rename it if you want to rename it, but that's not the problem. The navigation problem isn't the names. Navigation problem is knowing exactly where you are back in there, because there are no landmark references. It's so dense.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, those numbers are still forthcoming, right?
The forthcoming?
Yeah, you've got, you're going to be putting those numbers on.
They're on.
Oh, they are not.
Yeah, all the posts are
Yeah,
labeled.
but they're not
with
on,
numbers.
I don't think they're on the, they're not
But
on
they're
the new
not on
version
the
map, so you can't compare.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, we can add them to the, I was mostly trying to clean up the maps by not having a bunch of numbers all over it. I mean, if that's
Yeah.
something
That's
that
the whole purpose
would be.
of having the numbers, so that you can reference where you are to the map.
I was doing it more for emergency evacuation purposes. The fire department knows where all the numbers are, you know, where the corresponding posts are, but I thought maybe it was just, you know, a little bit more information than the average person needed, but if that's something that you guys would want to see, I mean, it's not a big deal.
Well, if you're
I'd
out
have to
there-
look
Quite
at it
honestly.
and,
If you're hiking for the very first time and don't know it, and I've got a little map and it says 16, and I see 16, I know where I'm at. But if it's just on a sign, that 16 doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely needs to be on the map, I think, if people have got access to the map.
Yeah, Sam, when I got here, I liked it. I thought it was a clever idea to have both, but I do realize it messes up the map, and if we can't make the map clear with all those numbers on, then it becomes a problem. So I can see both sides.
Separate maps.
Yeah.
well, we don't have maps anyway, so this is a little bit. I
But
mean,
yeah, but you are working towards them, right?
I guess.
Well, we have them that we print and copy. We don't have the ones like.
Well, we don't have like brochures, we don't
Right,
have anything
brochures,
that people would like want to take in the woods and.
But there surely is on an app where
Well, you can't, I mean, you could,
You don't have service down there?
well, that's an issue, but also like, I mean, mountain bike project or all trails or anything like that wouldn't necessarily have those numbers lined up. Like that's something that's, we could put on our website.
Yeah,
but
that's what I meant, it's on the website.
It's like,
So
you
if
know,
I
whether or
pulled
not you
up-
have service or not, it's
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
Also, I do plan on putting more like backcountry maps in, like just a post with a, you know, 12 by 12 or 16 by whatever dimensions it would be, maps on there, and then, you know, like little "you are here"
You are
points.
here, yeah, I like that.
well,
You are here, I think that was as good as
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I think if you have the "you are here," you don't need it on a map.
Yeah, so that's an idea, especially junctions that are a little bit, obviously not every single junction, but, you know, ones that are a little bit more confusing where multiple trails are coming in and out, so.
Sam, did you say you needed some things tonight, and why would that be?
Oh, I was going to ask if, well, I feel like that's up to the commission to do any kind of trail renaming, and that was what I was going to ask, was about that purple section of Twin Knobs. I feel like the section that I've outlined in purple, I mean, is that something that you guys are open to potentially renaming? I mean,
Hey, you're the trails person, does it make perfect sense to you?
I mean, it does to me, but I
I look at this and it makes perfect sense to me. Sue's done it, and it makes sense to her.
Yeah. Sharon, does
We
it make
go with
sense
the
to you?
experts.
It does make sense because it makes no sense that it says Twin Knobs. So what are you going to call it, Sharon's Way?
I'm going to call it Sharon. I ain't Sharon with Sharon. Trail. No, I was thinking Hidden Falls. I mean, it just sounds, like most of the names of trails out there kind of have some kind of geological reference to them. And yeah, and it's got that pretty waterfall when it's, so that was my idea. I ain't no poet, so I'm going to need a vote on this. I don't even know how you guys would make a motion. I don't know what the motion
Well, I
would
don't
even
know that
sound like.
you need to decide that it's okay to rename it, and then someone needs to decide who makes that decision, what to rename it. Who does that? I mean, I think you could make a motion, someone could make a motion to rename the trail, or that it needs to be renamed.
Ooh, we could put a vote out on Facebook on our trails page. Just joking.
Oh, yeah, he's kidding, right? I mean,
You could make, you wouldn't even need a motion, you could just have like a resolution, or we could instruct Scott to look into what it involves to rename a trail, because I don't even know, I could look it up too. I don't want to, there may be some precedent involved in how we rename trails, and I don't know exactly what it is, so. Kevin, are you aware of how trails are renamed?
We have a trail named Twin Knobs. I don't think we have too much rules about what we're naming them.
True, but if somebody's named that trail,
Well, we just recently named a trail that had been previously unnamed. We named it Foster Trail. And that was just a motion and a vote,
just a motion and a vote,
yes.
okay?
We can't name it Foster Trail. So I'm just,
No.
yeah, saying.
Well, does anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we rename the section of trail that runs between Bench Loop and Hyde Hollow, that's currently called Twin Knobs, and change it to Hidden Falls.
a second.
That's Sue and Mark second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-0, motion passes.
And then Sam,
Hey.
you'll go ahead and change the maps, and
I'll change the maps and I'll get with Dustin about making some new signs that correspond, and we'll, obviously line up with those changes. Thanks for having me, guys. I would
Thank you,
really would like to say that due to the nature of like presenting trail stuff and the need to have some sort of like reference point understanding of the system, I would really love it. Like, really, I really would if more people came out and if we could do some sort of like, even if it's just a hike, like a monthly social hike.
Absolutely.
I think that'd be great. And
I think you look at the forecast in the next week or so and throw us a date or two.
okay, yeah. I don't know how. I guess I would get with Scott about. It wouldn't just be commissioners; it'd be public and everything.
right,
just
no,
sort of like
I
a
think just pick a date, or it could be like.
second Wednesday or
Second Wednesday, yeah, exactly.
whatever.
And
yeah.
and then just put it on the,
Do second and fourth Tuesdays at 6.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
we
No.
we don't need any kind of vote on that. Just get it on the website, and,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Put it out there.
Cool.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Sweet.
Sam.
Thanks, guys.
Good job,
All
Sam.
right.
This is nice.
It is nice, thank you, Sam. Okay, what's next?
That's it. Oh, Commissioner's comments?
Commissioners' comments. Mark?
I have none at this point.
Has none. Sue?
I have some where I did my notes. Yeah. The first suggestion I have, we're coming up to probably fairly soon hiring architects to look into Basin Park. And I'd like to put in a request that we put out either a survey or request for comments to the public and get some feedback from them on their uses, any potential other uses, what they would like to see changed. And then we can just hand that information to the architects and they can use it, incorporate it as they see fit.
I think both of their proposals, by the way, indicate that they would be involved in that sort of process.
Well, the engineer was talking about putting some plans together and then presenting to the public. This is just letting them in right in the very beginning and in a formal way.
You would do a survey,
Yeah.
look back like at that last,
It's just a suggestion.
Let's talk this week. Wait and have a night.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I have a second comment. And this is about the rules and regulations. We passed these rules and regulations. They're currently not on the website. I think they were with the old blog and then got dropped when you put up the new blog, Scott. So we're not doing a good job of letting the public know about what the rules and regulations are. And the rule relaxation that has been particularly controversial has been the one at Basin Park, around the music and the busking permit. The form for that is on the website currently, if I get this right. You have to go to About, then go to Resources, and then scroll all the way down the page. And then there's a link, but there's no explanation. And I got there on my laptop. I couldn't even get there on my phone. So I'm hoping that we can look into this. I mean, it takes a lot to enforce a permit system, and it seems like it's just gotten dropped, so I think we should make a decision whether we're going to go ahead with this and really enforce it and get the word out and make sure that the public knows and has really easy access to it. Even the sign in Basin Park that tells people about it doesn't have the park's phone number. Or we drop it, but I think we're just kind of hanging out with a lot of misunderstanding about it. It's still officially in place, and we should really look at what we want to do with it this season.
Yeah. There are some issues that you and I can discuss. It goes deeper than that, and that it needs to be resolved. So
yeah, I think we should go one way or the other.
Okay. Fran?
Yep.
Nope.
Nope, no comments? Okay. We need to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. Sue sent to us.
Yes, I sent those out, I think, on Friday.
Back to them here. Okay.
And it was the March 15th meeting, regular meeting.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 15th regular meeting? Someone will make a motion?
I have a question on that one first. I wasn't at that meeting. I feel kind of, I need to approve minutes for a meeting I didn't attend. Do I still vote?
You can. You can vote to just say that you read them and that you approve them. You don't have to abstain, though people often do, but you don't have to.
Yeah. Sometimes it's turned out people have had to vote in that situation, otherwise we didn't have a quorum. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move to approve them.
Okay. Ms. Mark, have a second?
I'm in the same situation. I wasn't on that, but based on approving, yes, I will make this a second,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Discussion, other than that? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 4-0. The minutes are approved. A motion to adjourn?
I propose we adjourn.
Sue, a second?
second.
Mark, a second? Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. We are adjourned. It is 8:37 PM. Thank you.
Kevin's back.
Kevin's back. Thank you, Kevin.
It's 3:37 here.
I know. I was thinking that, golly.
Oh,